it's interesting. I'm coming from a world, I was for quite a while the CEO of the International Committee of the Red Cross, where the last 10 years, becoming a white has been very difficult, interestingly enough. So for me, I was not able anymore to deploy white people as expatriates in difficult places. So I realized 15 years ago, maybe, that being white, which in the humanitarian world was an important asset, there was still the idea you would send white people, almost like a missionary, to help the people. People would be impressed by that. You go back home. This world has changed dramatically already 15 years ago. One of the reasons, and it's not about Black Lives Matters, it was in fact related to all the issues related to terrorism and counter-terrorism, 9/11, that has made, in fact, suddenly our world for a white man and a white woman a much more world shrinked, which is interesting. And what I found very interesting in what you said is, despite of that, a lot of humanitarian organizations and the UN, for example, have not been able to somewhat understand what it means in terms of people management. And here I totally agree with you, because in fact, some of the privilege, some of the power dynamic are so entrenched into the system that even if it's today almost impossible to have a white person being an expatriate in a lot of places where we operate, it has become extremely complex to change the system and to have people in Africa, for example, accepting that an African could also be an expatriate, which is very interesting. So you have authorities in Chad, for example, or in Mali, they will not accept, an expatriate coming from Somalia. And I would say, no, he's representing the International Committee of Record. They will say, no, we want a white man. So there is also something about the relationship, which is interesting. And that leads me to the questions I would like to, which is about perpetuation, which I found interesting listening to you. There is something about perpetuation in the systems, but also in the way, let's say, the non-white have received that, and how are themselves somewhat trying to push that. So my questions to you is, where are we in this perpetuation journey? Do you see the same perpetuation as 50 years ago, or do we start to see some break in the perpetuation system? And I would really be interested to hear you more about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The Red Cross issue I'm aware of, and as you said, it was born out of resentment. People tired of the hypocrisy, and then the whole sort of 9/11 and all of that. So that happened. I worked with a lot of international NGOs, from Greenpeace to WWF, and I said, please enter the 21st century. Stop sending, Dutch people and all of these people to pontificate about rainforests in Indonesia. There are many qualified people in this part of the world who know much better and might actually be able to navigate the politics much better than them. But as you said, the system is entrenched. There are good salaries, there are jobs, there's a whole industry of essentially supporting it. So let me come to, and then the issue of also the locals, who are essentially, and I call it the capture of mind. A lot of people don't understand, and in the book, in the first chapter, I talk about my own journey. I talk about my own journey of being essentially brought up, educated in a colonial system, etc., beneficiary of many of those things. But you have to free yourselves of those things that essentially also deny you your identity and who you are, and in a way also then perpetuate these things. So that's the whole purpose of education, and I talk about that. And in that, I say that a lot of people don't understand how deep-rooted white privilege is in the eyes of non-white people. They essentially give a free pass. And a lot of white people sometimes unwittingly take it, but a lot of people accept it as the norm. That is the legitimate right. And they may be liberals, but they are beneficiaries of it, and they take it. And others simply take advantage of it because they know how the subservience plays. I've deliberately avoided the very explosive topic of sexual politics, but I'll do that someday. Particularly within the region, and you will know, in the aid agencies and all of that, how that plays out as well. So to your point about how it's being perpetuated, today, of course, the perpetuation is not through armies and military bases. The one country continues to do that. It's called the United States. And I see the attempts of the US to continue to essentially have its economic hegemony, et cetera, as essentially the attempt of a white settler community to continue to essentially dominate the world for economic reasons. So in the book, I argue that the best way to understand white privilege is essentially, the best way to understand it is how oppression and subjugation for economic gain is the main critical driver within Western societies, and it's perpetuated within nations and between nations in terms of things like bemoaning the supposed collapse of the rules-based system. Well, for most people of the world, I was not involved in writing the rules, so I want new rules, right? So this sort of obsession and this portrayal that somehow there's a rules-based system that now new actors want to change and it will somehow erode the legitimacy of the way we operate is a lie. It's the need to perpetuate what moved from having the armies and the administrators to now dominating the global system. The global system in our era is essentially a financial, economic trade system, and those rules need to be one in which we write the rules of the Western world and we dominate, and we will decide who can be players and who can't be, who are legitimate and who are not. So to your question, the simple answer, I think the perpetuation is a full-on war at the moment. It's subtle, it's military, it's economic, but it's everywhere. And that's how it's going on. And it's active. It's very active. And the main actors in this activation of the struggle is the media. The West. I have a whole chapter on the media, and someone like me who was devoted to reading The Economist, the FT, the New York Times. I can't even read this thing anymore. I live in a different world. I know some of the writers, the commentators, the editors. I can't read their bullshit, excuse my French, because I see it as so racist, so detached from where the world is going, so unable to essentially take themselves away from the protection of the privilege. And in my eyes, they've betrayed their true nature by seeking to preserve. The anti-China sentiment for me is one of the best indicators of this insecurity that is engulfed so many of these people who are essentially the guardians and perpetuators of the system. They have to wake up because the change is coming. The question is how long, but the change is coming. And I'll just finish by saying, but the perpetuation of that is also within the non-white communities. So elites in Asia are some of the biggest perpetuators of the sort of, white superiority complex. And they are also the ones who sometimes are most threatened by what I say. I've had editors tell me that, reviewers tell me they couldn't even get a review of my book into some of the Asian publications because most of the educated Asian editors are sort of liberal Western trained journalists, and they just can't understand, they can't accept this narrative. So the perpetuation is full on, the struggle is full on. It's very subtle, and you see it played out in the media and in the economic sphere.